Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I am CS the Viking Gamer, and this week on Let's Paint, we are finishing out the Catacombs box set with the large pieces of terrain. Today we're going to be using Lead Belcher, Auric Armor Gold, Balthazar Gold, and for contrast paints we're going to use Basilicum Gray, Contrast Wildwood, Black Templar, and Skeleton Horde. Alright, we're going to start things off with a all-over coat of Basilicum Gray. Now this is going to coat all of the main part of the pillars, as well as some of the stonework around the base and any of the archways. I say any of, there's really only one archway. And same as before, we're not being super cautious on some of the detail areas because the layer paints will cover up the contrast without really any issue. Whereas if we were doing contrast paints for our detail work, we'd want to take a lot more care to make sure that the details were still clean and not coated with anything else. And because of the hard-to-reach areas on the underside here, I switched to my angle brush, and that helped me get all the areas that I was not able to get to with my regular brush. Alright, so now we're just going to coat the bell with Lead Belcher. This will help to stand out from the rest of the model, while still giving it kind of that dark overtone that fits with the rest of the paint scheme. And while that's drying, we're going to do a quick touch-up with Wraithbone, just kind of covering up any of the areas that we're going to use with contrast. Anything that spilled over that we need to hit with a contrast paint later. And speaking of contrast paints, now we're on to Wildwood, which I gotta say, I love this paint for anything with a wood texture. It really does the work. Especially as a contrast, it saves so much time on shading. Now, I'm not being super detailed on anything from the underside, because it's not going to show up on camera that much, and it's not really going to be noticeable whenever I'm playing with the train pieces. Because, you know, how often do you look from the underside of a train piece? And again, just hit the underside up quick and dirty, just to get a full coating. Alright, so that's the main sections, all painted up with the wildwood. So now, we're going to hit the side details. So, just the two wooden sections that are holding the gibbets in place, and the wooden piece that holds the bell. Oh, and of course the wooden plank under the bell, which I had forgotten about earlier. Alright, so now we're going to use Auric Armor Gold, and this is going to paint the archways above the skeletons, as well as the edge detail of all of these little, almost like arrow slits. I mean, they're too small to be windows, and there's no way to get inside of those areas, so I decided that they could just use a little bit of edge detailing, nothing really overly fancy. So I realized that using a small brush was very tedious for this, so I switched to a slightly larger brush to try and hit both sides of the detail at the same time. It didn't quite work out, but the brush did seem to work easier for the details, so I just kept using it.
Now you can't really see these edge highlights too well on the camera, but as soon as it's on the table, it does help bring a little bit more life to the model. A couple last bits of detail here. And at this exact moment, I forgot all about the archways above the two skeletons in the front, but we'll come back and hit those later. And speaking of the skeletons, now we grab Skeleton Horde, and we go over all of the bone work. Now I'm not being too choosy on how light or heavy I'm going with the paint on the skeletons, because they're going to get a wash later and that'll help darken any areas that are missed. Though I will say, painting these skeletons inside the gibbets is not the easiest thing once they're attached to the model. If I had been thinking about it beforehand, I would have painted them before attaching it to the main piece, because they are a little bit spindly, and every time I touched them I felt like they were going to just break right off. So, easiest way to paint them once they were attached was to hold the whole piece in place and do the painting. I don't really recommend it. I think it would be much easier to just paint it beforehand and then glue it on afterwards. Because, I mean, one wrong sneeze right here, and that whole thing would have just snapped off. Alright, so now we're going to hit the columns and the archways with Balthazar Gold. Specifically, we're going to be hitting the very top of the archways and then the top and bottom of each pillar. This will give a nice accent without being overpowering, and give a fairly decent color contrast to the rest of the model, while still fitting the darker theme that we've got going on. And then we're going to hit the outer ring of this crest, but not the crest itself. And finally, on this side of the bell at least, we're going to hit up all the lettering of the inscribed runes. Now, I've actually had a couple of people ask me in the past, how do I do the runes without messing it up and getting it off the rune? The answer is, I hold my breath a lot, and it seems to help, but really just take it slow, and if it feels like your hand's starting to shake or you might make a mistake, just stop, take a breath, and then pick it up again once you're ready. Just a little dab of the Balthazar Gold on top of the rivets of the bell, and now we're going to switch to Black Templar. And any of the metal connection bits on the model is going to get hit up with this. This will help stick with that dark theme while giving a contrast to what we could be using, which was Lead Belcher. And while I was at it, I decided painting the whole gibbet in this color was not bad. I mean, I could have used lead belcher, but I wanted it to be a little bit darker look. Quick wash of the brush, and we're off to the other gibbet. Now this part I don't think I really have to do, but painting the underside just to kind of uniform everything, it works. Alright, so now we're still going to use the Black Templar, and we're going to paint the pillars framing these skeleton alcoves. This will help unify the piece with some of the other terrain that we've already painted, and it'll also help draw the attention of anyone looking at it to the skeletons themselves. And do the same on the front. Some last little bits of touch-ups on the metal connections. And on the hooks on the front of the upper section. And now, we are going to use lead belcher to do the chains that the gibbets are hanging from. This will give a good contrast to the darker colors of the gibbets themselves, without being too overpowering. So now we're going to go back to Auric Armor Gold, because at this point I realized that I'd forgotten the archways, and we're also going to use it for the bell, for a couple areas. So we're going to paint the rest of the crest on both sides of the bell. As well as the bottom rim of the bell itself. And now we paint the lower archway in gold, just to kind of help with that, unify that theme throughout the whole model. And now we switch back to Balthazar Gold, and we are going to use it to paint a lot of the rest of the detail bits. So there's a couple of kind of hoop rings and a couple of little detail scroll works on the sides. We're going to paint those in the Balthazar Gold, but not the rings themselves. Those, we go back and hit them up with Auric Armor Gold. The reason for this is because I've noticed that when you do a large piece like this, multiple colors contrasting in the same area draw the attention more. Now, having finished with the Auric Armor Gold, we switch to Agrak's Earthshade, and anything wood gets a full coating in the Earthshade. This will give it a dark wood look. And it'll also help mask any areas that we've missed. And do a quick wash of the skeletons. And you see what I mean about them being a little spindly on the gibbet there. Alright, having finished with the Earthshade, we're going to use Null Oil and wash the bell and a lot of the extra little detail bits and as much of the stonework as we can reasonably reach. So we're not really going to worry about the underside too much. And here we are with the finished piece. I had a lot of fun painting this model. There's a lot of detail work that you don't really notice until you start painting it. Now this was the last bits of the Catacombs Warcry box set, and it had 3 larger pieces of terrain, and I like how you can use them interchangeably. It really adds a lot of dimensionality to the box set. Well, everyone, thank you for tuning in. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe for future content. Next week, we will be continuing on with some more Warcry. I think we're going to start painting some of the teams. This is CS the Viking Gamer, signing off. Remember, everybody, victory or Valhalla.